Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film The Cat Returns from 2002. And this is my quest to review all of the films released by Studio Ghibli. This is the second theatrically released Studio Ghibli film, third film overall, not directed by Hayao Miyazaki or Isao Takahata. It is directed by Hiroki Morita, who is a newer animator. He actually got his start as an animator working on My Neighbor the Yamadas, which wasn't too far before this film. This is Studio Ghibli's only kind of sequel. It's a spin-off, really. The Baron character and Muta from Whisper of the Heart, but it's really a very different film. This film kind of combines the real world with this fantasy world instead of in Whisper of the Heart. The Baron was contained within this girl's story. They wanted to do a spin-off because they started to develop a 20-minute short film for a Japanese theme park, and then eventually, as they were working on it, it became a 45-minute film. It was called The Cat Project. The development of The Cat Returns is actually really similar to what happened to Porco Rosso. Porco Rosso was originally just going to be a short for an airline, and then it became Porco Rosso through developing it, and they really got into it. The Cat Project is similar to that. And then the director, Hiroki Morita, he presented storyboards to Hayao Miyazaki and Toshio Suzuki. It was originally just going to go straight to video or to TV like Ocean Waves, but they decided to release this theatrically. A teenage girl named Haru, who, while walking home from school with her friend, sees a cat with a little package in its mouth walking on its own, and then it's crossing the street and a big truck's coming, and she's afraid it'll probably run it over. So she gets her, I guess it's a lacrosse stick. I'm not exactly sure what kind of stick is. She gets the stick, scoops up the cat, and saves him from being squished by this truck. And then she finds out that it's not just an ordinary cat, it's a prince cat of cat universe or whatever. And then he says she will be rewarded because of what she has done for him. And then the cats and the king cat come at night and tell her she will be rewarded, and all this strange stuff is happening. Then she is told she will have to marry the prince cat, even though she's a human, he's a cat, and she doesn't want to marry a cat. But then she is told about the cat bureau, so she doesn't have to go to the cat kingdom, and the Baron is there and Muta. They try to save her from going there, and even though she does get taken there, they try to save her from the cat kingdom and from having to marry the cat prince. Of all the Studio Ghibli movies, this is probably one that I thought would probably go down easier. I have 3 cats. I enjoy cats. I like Studio Ghibli movies. Theoretically, this should be a slam dunk of me liking this movie, and this is my least favorite. I'm kind of surprised so many people like this one. It's the least Studio Ghibli film released by Studio Ghibli. Many of my complaints maybe are just more based on the fact that they don't really have a lot of directors direct films other than Miyazaki and Takahata, so sometimes the criticisms of that it's not a Studio Ghibli film is really the criticism that it's not a Miyazaki or a Takahata film. And this wasn't actually written by Miyazaki, and he wrote or storyboarded a lot of the films that he didn't direct. Maybe that's the problem, is that I'm trying to make this be a Miyazaki film. But the thing about Studio Ghibli, and the reason I'm reviewing all these Studio Ghibli films, and I want to see all of them, is because it is a great animation studio. But the reason it is so great is its storytelling is different, and that difference is what made them so influential. Those kind of non-conflict narratives. The fact that if you have an antagonist, you actually kind of know the antagonist, so it's not this one-dimensional evil character. The character of the king, or the king cat in the Cat Kingdom, is the most really just evil antagonist character that I've seen from Studio Ghibli. That kind of idea really took me out of this film, and it made me think about how would it be interesting if Studio Ghibli just made your normal kind of animated film rather than make the kind of amazing storytelling that they're known for. It's not horrible, certainly. It's not a bad movie. I just think it is certainly overpraised. I know Studio Ghibli has had, and still has, and that's the reason they're kind of stopping production, finding big director to take on the reins other than Miyazaki and Takahata, and they never really found that. And I don't think this film helped them find that. If the director of Whisper of the Heart had lived, he would have been that, and maybe this film would have been made. I don't know if he was even involved with working on the Cat project. There's nothing about Yoshifumi Kondo working on the follow-up. And it's kind of interesting that this film was made after he died. It's interesting they made a sequel or a follow-up, but it's not to a Miyazaki film. It's not to a Takahata film. It's by the only film that was released in theaters by Studio Ghibli that was directed by someone else. And I'm guessing, because I can't find anything about Yoshifumi Kondo having anything to do with this, that he couldn't really speak up and say, like, please don't make a follow-up. This is the most corporate I've seen the studio be, and certainly I understand it's a business. It kind of ruins the magic of Studio Ghibli. The Baron is a cool character. I love that character. I loved him in Whisper of the Heart, and I still think he's good in this film, but this film just feels like a typical animated film. We're saving somebody from the king. We have to get this girl out. She's transforming into something. She might have to get married to this guy she doesn't want to be married to. It's very like typical fantasy story. With Studio Ghibli, you could always tell that when they were doing a fantasy story, they would do it in a different way, and that's what I liked about them. And for The Cat Returns to be done in more of a typical way, and the direction's not really that amazing or anything. I also don't really like bipedal cat thing. Cats don't need to stand on their back claws. Cats should just be cats. To me, it just looked weird. They have like long bellies. It's just a little strange. I just don't really get this movie. It was probably the worst one I've seen up to this point. There's a few I haven't seen yet, but I've seen most of them, and I just don't really get what's appealing about it. Wasn't The Castle of Cagliostro like a way better version of this movie? And that at least had amazing direction behind it. This just doesn't really have that. It's just done in the Studio Ghibli style. The animation is a little different, but not too much different. I don't understand why this film was released in theaters over something like Ocean Waves, and it actually did really well in Japan. It was the highest grossing film of 2002. When I think of Studio Ghibli, I think of how adventurous they are, how they're risk-taking, and then they have a new director to really take on the reins, a young director, and then they make like this Cat Kingdom movie, and it feels like some borrowed tropes from them a little bit, but it just doesn't really have the amazingness in terms of the storytelling. It doesn't have the love behind it. It just feels like I could watch this from any studio. This doesn't feel distinctly Ghibli, other than the Baron's there. And there's so many other Studio Ghibli films I'd prefer to see a sequel of, like Porco Rosso or Kiki's Delivery Service, and for them to do it with this, it just felt like a cheap knockoff. Spin-off with movies never really works the same way like the Jeffersons did. There are good animated movies starring cats, like Aristocats, but The Cat Returns, like with this whole Cat Kingdom thing and the whole idea that she saved this guy and she's basically cursed because she saved this cat, is an interesting fairy tale idea. But The Cat Returns is just like not that interesting or unique, and even if it was done at whatever studio, it just doesn't have really that much flair to it. It has a bizarre story that plays more like an average kids film. That's one of the things that even with Whisper of the Heart or with Ocean Waves, those were at least interesting takes on them. This film just really did not do it for me the way Studio Ghibli does, and it didn't make me feel the wonder of imagination. It just made me think like, this is fucking ridiculous, this Cat Kingdom crap, and I'm someone who likes cats and would totally love to see a cat animated movie. It just makes me have more of the pessimist comes out because it's just not a great story. It's a story that just feels like something I would watch when I was a kid, and then I would be like, oh, whatever happened to that movie, and rewatch and go, ugh, that wasn't as cool as when I was a kid. The villains are just the bad antagonists that you expect from an animated film. And when I look at Studio Ghibli's influence, and like particularly with something like Frozen, which I think was incredibly influenced by Studio Ghibli, and how there's no real villain in that for a long period of time, and even the villain's not, it's really about the two sisters. The villain's not like your typical Disney villain, and if you've noticed, like more and more animated films are going for more of that, where if there is a villain, it's downplayed because they're so influenced by Ghibli. Even in Spirited Away, you kind of understand the villain. Even in Princess Mononoke, it's more of a conflict of all these nations. And then when you look at The Cat Returns, it just doesn't seem to have that kind of zenness and the understanding, that real adult way of looking at a story. This just, to me, felt like a boring kind of kids animated film. This is probably the one film by them I honestly kind of disliked. I don't think it's really a good movie. It also doesn't seem to really get into the characters as much. The lead girl in this film is a great character, and you could have had a lot more development with her before doing all this crazy ass nonsense. Cat Returns just kind of shows you the typically boring storytelling that people complain about and make fun of from an animated film. And The Cat Returns is the kind of film that makes people want to parody them and make bad jokes about this kind of a film in a TV show. And it's unfortunate because of the legacy legacy of this studio. Maybe that's unfair, but this is probably my least favorite Studio Ghibli film. So if you have seen The Cat Returns and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Check out my Studio Ghibli reviews in my Studio Ghibli review playlist, which is be an annotation below. And thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.